And hello, everyone, and welcome to this very, very special conversation about El Lugar being a benevolent creation. For all of you who haven't heard El Lugar, just had to mute Ibro. It's all good. So for everyone you all know El Lugar, but what do you know about benevolent capitalism and benevolence at work? Well, for those of you who follow me and El Lugar in construction, you probably noticed that we are doing things quite different than normal, and that we also have some amazing magic showing up. And as I mentioned quite a lot of times now, that's not a coincidence. These are choices we make, and this is how the universe supports us, because we are being kind to nature. But it all actually started 4 or 5, or maybe already 6 years ago, when Gary Douglas had a conversation with 2 amazing people, Steve and Chitusa Bowman, about benevolence. And when I see what we are doing at El Lugar, it always reminds me of everything we talked in that very first benevolent capitalism class in Melbourne 5 years ago, where I met Steve and Chitusa for the first time. So I wanted to invite them to today's call and have a conversation and share with all of you how we are creating El Lugar and what is benevolence in action. I mean, reading about it and talking about it is one thing, but seeing it happening, benevolence in action, how can you apply it to your life? How are we doing it? And what are the elements in the course of creation of El Lugar? How we deal with people, with government, with taxes, with legal stuff, with money, with construction companies, with building, with planning. It's actually an endless conversation. So we're going to pick the, 2 or 3 most, most relevant, most prominent sections. For me, it is an honor to have Steve and Chitusa here on tonight to start that conversation and to share with you what is benevolence and what are the benevolent elements with El Lugar. Where are we being benevolent? How does it look like? How do we do it? And what are we receiving in return for being that kindness to planet Earth? So welcome, Steve and Chitusa Bowman. They're joining us from very early morning in Melbourne, Australia. So thank you so much for getting up that early. I also have to mention that Steve and Chitusa are part of the Gary and Dane's advanced business mentorship class. So they are missing out the first hour of that great, amazing class to be here with us tonight or this morning and share their brilliance and their benevolence with us and give us some insights on what they see benevolent when we created El Lugar and what it is all about. So welcome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us. It's interesting when people ask us, what are some good examples of organizations or corporates or entities creating from the benevolent capitalism way of being. The first one that comes to mind is El Lugar. Not because Gary and Dane and David are involved in it, but because it actually truly embodies the whole notion of benevolence. For those that don't know, benevolence comes from 2 ancient Greek words, bene, which means wishing well, and volence, like the word volunteer. Volence means for all, wishing well for all. So what we see from where we are happening with El Lugar is there is an energy throughout the whole project that wishes well for all. And we're actually going to interview David a little bit on this, because David's been involved.
But I'm just a lawyer. I don't know anything.
So what we've seen is some projects, and we're very lucky, very honoured to know some of the behind the scenes projects that go on that many people don't get to hear about. So, for example, the way that the nursery was created to create something greater in Costa Rica, not just for El Lugar. The way they deal with employees, the way they deal with the architects. Each one of those has an amazing story of benevolence behind them, the wishing well for all. And the project is ahead of time. I won't say under budget, because the budget is what it needs to be, so they change that when it's required. The way that it's been funded is creating greater for everyone concerned. It just breaks all the rules of boring business. So, David, what would you say would be the two major projects that are happening in El Lugar right now that embody and be this benevolence?
Well, thank you for that question. And I think looking at what benevolence is, I think the idea of how it should be built is actually what, for me, it's the foundation. It's the foundation for everything else that was developed and got created out of that. It's the foundation that Gary Douglas put in place when he talked to the architects for the very first time and said, listen, you're not allowed to cut a single tree. You're not allowed to level out any hill. You're not destroying nature. You are building this resort around nature, in communion with nature. You don't build it. You don't design it in your office and then you just put it there. No, you go there. And how the earth, how the land is, this determines where the roads are, where the houses are. And you are not cutting any tree and you're not leveling out any hill. You are building it according to nature and not against it.
Mm.
And this
that's a wonderful example, David. That's a wonderful example of where everyone has choice. You can choose to do the quickest, easiest, most destructive way of building, or you can choose to create the quickest, easiest way that celebrates the earth and everything around it. And it was, from what we saw, it was just a choice. And that's one of the things that is just amazing. To be benevolent is just a choice. It's not about doing good. It's not about being philanthropic. It's just about knowing what the choices will create into the future.
And that in itself, working with the architects to come up with different possibilities. And that is the key philosophy of Benevolence at Work, is to generate, to maximize possibilities and wishing well for all. So for you to have to work with architects, to inspire them to see that there is a different way of working and creating. It's already create something in their universe that they never have some client or someone that they have to work with before. You must have some story about the conversation that you had to actually invite the architect to see that we're not going to totally wipe out all the tree and create something different. You give them the space to work and to design from a different place.
And before David goes into that, can I invite everyone who's listening to this to just reflect on what we're talking about, what that means in your own life and what that means in your own business. So if you recognize that in your business you have choice, you can either do it this way or this way or this way or this way. But if you ask the question, which will create the greatest for now and into the future, that gives you a focus on the choice that will probably create more for you. And it's not just David and Chitusa and I talking about stories of what's gone on at El Lugar. Each one of these stories, Chitusa and I have unpacked and said, what does that mean in our life? When we get to the story of the nursery, that is an amazing story. And we've asked, what does that look like in our life? What is the equivalent of the nursery in our life? What would that look like? That's wishing well for all. So please, all of you listening to this, just reflect what that would look like in your business, in your life. And these stories are really just to illustrate what is happening.
This one, I mean, that one is very much to do with when you're talking in the next session. But this one, we want to invite people to see how the things are being created in El Lugar using benevolence at work philosophy. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Before I go into the details, I want to mention that being benevolent doesn't mean that you are becoming a charity and you include everyone who needs a job. Because before we could have that conversation with the architects that actually led to the way we built El Lugar, we had to fire 3 architect firms. So
why did you have to fire the 3 architects firm? Can you talk about those 3?
They said yes to everything, and then I said it will cost you way more, but don't you worry, we will find a way to make it cheaper. And we said,
but that's already not benevolence. That's about
it was just about maximizing profit. And then I gave them all the book that Gary Douglas wrote, The Place, and said you might want to read this book to get what this project is about. 2 of the first architect firm they ignored it. They were fighting against, and they just said, you know what, you'll go bankrupt because it will be so expensive that you can never earn the money that you are spending. And when I said, well, it's not about the money we earn, it's about the change we create in the world and the money we earn, they just rolled the eyes. And I said, you know what, thank you, done. Because benevolence for me doesn't mean that you become the doormat and say yes to everyone and be kind to everyone. So before we go further with the stories, charity and benevolence, can you extrapolate a little bit on that and the misbelief, the lie that many people buy that when you are benevolent, you have to be good all the time? I think that's not really true benevolence.
I think the main thing before Steve go into saying that is the 2 different energy. Charity often comes from a space of superior position, where benevolence is wishing well for all. Am I correct, Steve? Yes. So can you?
Yeah, charity is interesting because it comes from, to some extent, a position of we have something you don't, we shall give it to you because you can't. We have something you don't, so we shall give it to you because you can't. And that's a lot with, when people talk about charity, it has a lot of judgment and charge behind it. It's not wrong, it's just a different energy. So when we look at benevolence as wishing well for all, sometimes that means saying bye-bye to someone very quickly, like David. David is very, very good at this. I take my hat off to you, Dr. Kubes, about how well you are able to manage what other people would see as very difficult situations. And you do it with such elegance that it is awe-inspiring.
Thank you.
So, and that's why I love listening to your stories. The benevolence is where you wish well for all and look to see what is going to create growth. Benevolent capitalism, the word capitalism comes from an old English word, capita, which means the organic growth of, and then it used to mean cattle, the organic growth of the herd. So now we're talking about wishing well for all whilst organically growing. Organically growing means no force and effort involved in it. Let what needs to be. Charity, on the other hand, is from that position of, to some extent, power, I see where people are suffering, I shall fix it.
Well, it tends to go to working with people who are less fortunate than ourselves.
Oh.
You know, how often do you hear
Yeah.
people say that we're going to set up the organization so we can help? You know, the two words, help the people who are less fortunate than ourselves. Benevolent is not that space. It's about everyone have the contribution to create more together than just trying to help someone who less fortunate than ourselves.
For those that are interested, a very, very good example is Grameen Bank. If ever you want to look up something and do some background reading, have a look at Grameen Bank, where they started off from the point of view of benevolence, and they have created more change in the world than any charity.
I think they probably have some story about that too. I sense that the way you work with the garden, the people who do the plant, has similar energy to Grameen Bank, because you sort of work with them to create more for them as well as for El Lugar and everyone concerned. So we'll come to that.
That's my favorite story.
After
yes,
David talked
I also have to say
back onto the architects that no longer have a job. So
I also want to say something. It's not what I see as a benevolent element. We were also willing to receive from everybody who then chose not to be part of it. And one of the benevolent actions we took is that we fired them, because it wouldn't have been fun for them. It would have been torture for them. Because if someone doesn't want to change a point of view, if someone cannot receive what you have to say, you better walk away. And this is also a very important issue that you might consider applying to your personal life and to your personal business, not just here taking it as a story. If someone is not willing to receive what you have to offer, it's fine, but you are allowed to say goodbye. You don't have to stick with those who can't receive from you. You don't have to stick with those who don't want to listen to you, who have a different point of view. In this strategy, I would say, well, according to my opinion, and I said, good, and my opinion is different. So you better split up here. Give me your final invoice. That's it. Thank you and goodbye. And of course they were angry because they lost the job and they lost all they had already calculated how much money they will make. And they did judge us and say, well, you are talking about benevolence and doing all the good, and then you fire me. And this is the point you would just say, yes, no fight. You're right. I'm wrong. You're right. Because you can't change someone else's point of view, but you do have the right to walk away, and you do have the right to say, it doesn't work for me, goodbye. And that was one of the benevolent elements that I enjoyed most, because benevolent means to include yourself and to include what works for you. And that was the beauty of this project, to choose what works and also include the project. What does the project need? Well, an architect who gets it. So please create someone. And on the way to that, we created another one. The second architect started reading Gary's book, and in all his presentations, he had part of what Gary was saying. He took it all out of the chapters. So we were like, okay, at least someone is willing to read the book and gets it. And he didn't. But he was a great contribution, because through him, we met an environmental lawyer, Silvia Calvo, who was amazed by the project. She was working under him, and she got so excited about the project when he finally said, well, it doesn't work. You can't just create something that looks like as it would have been here for 100 years. You have to have it modern, because if it's not modern, nobody will come. We said, we don't want modern. So we said goodbye. He was also very angry. And then that lawyer, Sylvia, called us and said, I heard that you terminated the contract with the architect. I was working under him. I just want to let you know we're not married. I run my own business and I am available. So she showed up. And she's still working for us for 3 years now. And she's an amazing contribution. She's one of those who gets it and does her magic. And later, years later, when we had, when you go there, you have drinks and you have these private conversations. She said, well, this was the very first time that she chose to contact the client and kind of go beyond being part of the architects group. And she left the architect completely. She didn't work for him. She said, but I knew one thing. I knew, wow, that's what I want. So we inspired her to step up. That's one of those elements where you go, okay, you can fire someone, but you can take other people on. And then we met another guy. So just because the entire architects firm didn't get it, there was always something that we could take on or that we could find out or someone that we could invite. It wasn't wrong that they didn't get it. It was just part of our journey. So at every station, we took a passenger on board and kept on going. And the last architects firm, we didn't fire them, but we said, okay, it doesn't work for us in the way you do it. And then the architect actually said, well, it doesn't work for me for many, many years to work in this architect's firm. I just created my own spin-off. I'm doing my own business now. So if you need anyone, I'm available. And after a very short conversation with Garrett Douglas, I contacted him and said, hi, it's David, your first new client. So he started his business with us. He's still on board. And it was his main business partner. He wanted to build everything in concrete there. We have in Lugar, we have this setback zone. So Lugar, the land is along a river, and you cannot build to the edge of the river. You have to have a setback zone. And that setback zone, on the hills is it's sometimes here, sometimes here. We wanted to mark it out. And he said, yeah, let's build a concrete wall. I said, what? Yes, then the nature can't take it back again. And then you can see it for 3 or 4 years. I said, are you kidding me? You want to build a concrete wall? And then he wanted to mark out where all the houses are. And instead of cutting the grass, which required manpower, he says, no, there are great chemicals. You put them on and all the grass dies. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Didn't you get it? And he didn't. So we fired him, but he had the initial idea of, not the initial idea, but he gave us that one little hint with our nursery, because he was calculating the budget for all the plants and trees we would need at Lugar. And he said, you will need to put a budget in for $450,000 because this is the amount of plants and trees you will need. And I said, wow, we are in Costa Rica, they are everywhere. And he mentioned while he was walking around the land trying to figure out where to put the concrete walls and where to put all the the chemicals to destroy the grass. I said, well, you could just start growing them on your own. And that's the thought that Claudia Cano picked up. And awesome. This is how the nursery started. So there is no right or wrong when you do it benevolent. We even allowed ourselves to receive from this, sorry to say that, asshole who wanted to build everything in concrete and put chemicals on the grass to kill it. Even he was a contribution. Well, thank you for that very first thought on what else is possible when you look at the budget for plants. We then terminated the contract with him as well. And said, sorry, we'll do it our way. But we allowed ourselves to receive. We didn't go into, okay, you are mean, you don't care about nature, so everything that comes from your side is bad. That's judgment, okay? We had no point of view. We clearly stated, hey, that doesn't work for us. Thank you so much and goodbye. And we allowed to take this one thought, this one little thing that he mentioned while walking and said, well, that's actually not a stupid idea. Let's create it. And this is how the idea of the nursery came when we said, okay, what would it take to start our own nursery and plant our own trees and bushes and flowers. So in 2 to 3 years, when a Lugar is ready, we already have it all, and we might spend the same amount of money, but then we will be running our own business. And then Claudia called that one gardener. He was the gardener of a venue in Costa Rica, Sueño Azul, where Access Consciousness did 7-day events years ago. And Claudia called him and said, hey, would you be up for this project? And he started next day. It was one of those moments where there was nothing in place. He just knew. And it all folded itself together. That all the permissions you need, everything, it was just not an issue. And he then...
David.
I interrupt you 1 second, David, because that is such a great story. But I would like to point out that when what David is talking about is the total demonstration of when you function from a space of infinite choice and infinite possibilities in the business, in the project, in your life. This is exactly what happened, what you can create. Like
every choice creates something.
It's a magic. Like it seemed like magic, but the first 3 architects, any moment in time, you could see that, oh God, you know, are we going to ever get someone who get us? Have you gone into that space of, oh, what am I going to do? Because if you have to be in the question all the time that, okay, these people are not working, what else is possible? And would you have to be totally trust and follow your awareness energy that there are infinite choice and infinite possibility out there, and Costa Rica must have someone who can actually work in this space. Can you talk more about that? Your mindset.
I was kind of, you know, you finally find this architect, he reads the book, he also seems to get it. I remember that moment of knowing, and it's funny, Gary Douglas always says that everything he learned about business, he learned it from horses. I have a slightly different point of view. Everything I learned about doing business, I learned from El Lugar. I remember it so clearly. We were sitting in this office. He had prepared everything. He said he got it all. He just did a little revision of the presentation, and everybody was in that presentation. Simone, Brandon, Gary, Danes. It was this, okay, let's just final approval and then let's give it a go. And there was this one slide with the wooden house buildings, and they were all modern. And the moment I saw this slide, I got it. I got this very clear no, because we all were so clear of what we want to create. And then he wanted to open the back door and sneak in his modern shit again. And that was the moment I knew. And everybody's like, yeah, I'm fine. Let's just change these houses. And it was actually me who then said, no, he won't change that. And then Gary actually asked me a question, so should we fire him? I said, yes. And he said, well, then drive to his office and fire him. And I was like, why me again?
And that's the thing, David. I love you about the willingness to be the one to pull the plug on things. I mean, that would not be a good generative space for most people, but for you, you are making the choice from a space of possibilities, which I really do admire you so much. So many projects that we've been talking about is you have to let people know that it doesn't work, and you're the one who have to be there to receive all of the judgment. You're the one who have to be there who receive all of the danger dart throwing at you energetically and everything. But to be in that space of saying, I am representing the Benevolent at Work, Benevolent project, and this is the choice I am making on behalf of all these people. It's a space that, you know, it's very challenging to be. So what do you do? What do you be for you to be in that space when you have to do that? And that's not one example. No. I've heard of many examples you have to do.
It's ongoing, and it is required. We also have David Keddy here on the Zoom, and he might jump on in a minute. And
come and say hi,
Keddy.
David Keddy. Come and say hi.
It's this moment where you know this needs to change, and you know you piss off everyone involved. And I was like, oh my God, we're about to kick off. By that time, we had 60 investors who's already paid up their full share, and we were about to start. And I just knew. It is that moment where you go into, okay, perceive all the future, and you go, okay, yes, if do we keep him? Should we kick him out? It was so clear to me. There is no other option. There's no other way. We need to get rid of him. That was just the beginning. You just know.
And can I add to that, David? David, one of the things that I see you do, and this is for everyone who's ever going to be in that position, you do it with no point of view, and you do it quickly.
Yes. Yeah, but I have to protect myself from analyzing my choices and questioning my choices and going into my head. So I have no other choice. It has to be now.
And no justification, no explanation. It's just, it's not working. Hop in the car, tell them straight away, and then see what shows up.
Yes.
And for those that are listening to this, if ever you have to deal with staff or employees or contractors, just tap into that energy and you'll find it actually becomes so much easier and a contribution and benevolent. Sometimes the most benevolent thing is to say bye-bye.
And to say, hey, that doesn't work. So I was at Lugar 2 weeks ago, and I had the pleasure of joining David Keddy, who is our construction manager, who lives at Lugar and makes sure that things get created the way we want. He has to deal with that every day on a daily basis, telling it, hey, this is the way we want it, checking on it, they don't do it, and then say, oh, you take that off, you do that new. I know it's pouring, it's raining, it's Friday afternoon, and you change that, and you do it now. So David Keddy, welcome, and thank you so much for being that steward of benevolence. On site. You are not benevolence at work, you're benevolence on site. And I saw you being that when they designed the main gate, not exactly how you told them. And I remember that situation where we were sitting in the car, it was pouring like crazy. I had to go on a Zoom, so I was kind of, hey, I need to leave now. And you sat there and said, that has to change. You stepped out, you're standing there in the rain. Can you share those moments when you just know, when you know, it won't be comfortable for everyone around, but that's what's required?
Everything you're talking about, Stephen Chitusa, know me well. It's like I don't have the ability to analyze the way you do. So for me, it was just obvious. It was creating an elegance that the way they had laid the wall out was not correct. And that's all I can say, is it wasn't correct. And so I just knew it had to change, no matter what it costs. I've been many times in my life, I said, oh, that's good enough. Here, that doesn't apply. It needs to be done. And there's, I don't know, it's obvious there's only one way to do it. I can see it, and that's it. Yeah. So,
you know the energy of what's required. You know the energy of Lugar. And when you said that you don't have the ability to analyze, I would say you don't have the gift. You don't have the gift of distraction of trying to analyze.
No, I would love to add to that, David Keddy. We know each other for
ever
many moons. but I always hear you talking about how you don't have the capacity to analyze, where I always see it as you have the gift to be in the space of possibilities and interesting point of view. Where we are going into our head, David Caddy is always see the possibilities, and he doesn't go into the judgment of an analytic of this reality. So I would love to acknowledge you for that you, when you said, I don't have capacity to analyze, I would love to say you have capacity to see beyond this reality with no conclusion, no projection, no expectation and judgment, because those are analytic skill. So when you don't have that, you are able to see totally different possibilities without judgment of right or wrong, good or bad, but you always willing to pull the hard, what you call, choice, the really interesting choice that you have to make. And my question is it easier in Spanish than in Italian, or is it equally as hard?
David has moved, just so everyone knows, David was also the project manager of the castle in Italy, Castle Bowman, and he was the only one who could have created that. The two Davids between them are unstoppable.
There's a third David now.
Oh yeah, and the third David in El Lugar is actually the more handsome of the three of them.
Well, we'll post a picture.
The
iguana.
Sorry, David. I just thought I had to interject there because I think you've heard that all the time, and I always admire the way you said, well, I don't have the way to analyze. I thought, well, I would choose that. I would like to be that, like David, all the time.
In case people who are listening to this don't recognize it, the gift that David Caddy is to ensure that the energy and possibility of El Lugar is actualized. There is no one else on this earth who could do what David is able to do. So thank you, Mr. Caddy, on behalf of everyone.
And I hope you all have listened carefully to what David said, because he doesn't talk much, but what he says, oh my God. Listen to every word he said. He said, how many times have I said, oh yeah, it's good enough, and it wasn't? Because of what? Because it would be too complicated to change. It would cause too much irritation. It would cause too much time, too much money. That's what I learned from these 2 weeks where I was at El Lugar. Now that it's good enough, but not for me. Good enough. What does it mean? It's good enough. Why would you make a compromise with yourself? And that's the moment where we all know it should change, but we don't speak up because we avoid conflict. We avoid extra costs. We avoid to be judged. Could you please all stop that and take El Lugar and David Caddy as an example for just good enough is not part of my reality anymore. I saw him being that with that gate and the way it was designed. I was like, wow, I'll have that from now in my life, because it has to work for me. I want it to be the way I desire and not just good enough, because I desire more than just good enough. So thank you for that, David. And I know we had that conversation.
I would love to ask both David about, on behalf of people, is when you, in that space of knowing it's not good enough, it's not from a space of judgment, right, David Caddy? Is it a space of knowing? Can you talk a bit more about that? Because for us, when we go in the space of good enough, we tend, analytical mind, we tend to go into conclusion, projection, and judgment about right or wrong, good or bad. But I sense that when you say that it's not good enough, you come from a space of, well, there are other possibilities. Could you expand on that?
Well, there's always more possibilities. I mean, there's many, many different ways of doing things. I constantly have to look at things in in what I go through is I don't have the same professional skills that a lot of engineers and people have here. But what I have is an ability to look at something and find the most elegant solution is what I'm always looking for. It has to be, elegance is a magical word. I learned at the castle more than ever. It's just doing everything in the most productive way. When you used, Steve, the words, wish well for all. Well, I mean, for me, that's my life. I mean, I've been struggling over benevolent capitalism ever since the word came up, and you describe it, and it doesn't, the struggle is because I want to analyze, I want to make it more than what it is.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Oh yeah.
So being here, it's really clear what needs to happen. We can't describe it any other way. I spend my whole time here, present, so I get to see every little detail, and I don't have an end picture. It's not absolutely clear, but I have the energy of what it is. And for the front gate, it's the energy of the gate, what Gary wants to create with it, that sense of timelessness. Timelessness is what El Lugar is. And I don't know what that means. Go on.
I hope everyone heard David Caddy when he said, I'm just present. Okay. Being present with, that allows you to know what can and can't be, allows you to know the energy. And the two things that David said there, which I hope everyone takes away, because very seldom will David Caddy ever speak publicly. So you have no idea how rare this is, and we are in gratitude of that. Being present with the energy was a summary of what David says, and he just is that. So thank you, Mr. Caddy. It's always a pleasure. I just miss our whiskey room evenings.
So
Yes.
when you say that you are being present with the energy, you are present with the possibilities, but it's not from the vision of what it should look like, but it's more like the energy of what it could be. Am I correct? Not from the analytical, but from the energy of it.
Well, nothing's defined. Everything I do here is never defined. I leave everything open as long as possible so that change can occur, because change will always occur. Even like Gary sends a container of random doors. So we go through the random doors, and I have to apply those to each casita. But there's nothing absolutely defined. It changes constantly.
So when you received those random doors, David, what was the first question or the first thing that went through your mind that you can repeat?
He's doing it again.
What else is possible, right? I said that you function from what else is possible more than people, but you don't say it.
No, what David just said, and this is, please listen to every word he says, is there is no end result. It's not about having the perfect plan. It's about allowing yourself to go with what shows up and follow the energy. I mean, saying, oh, let's just follow the energy and have no clue what you're doing. You can do this blowing hot air and bash someone with excess phrases. What we are talking about here is following your knowing and allowing yourself to start your creation, although you don't have it planned out until the end. And that's not required, because having it planned out tends to take you into conclusion, into completion, and that's not creation. So that the beauty of creating a Lugar, and that's another amazing benevolent element of creating a Lugar, allowing ourselves to change when change is required and truly follow the energy of what's required as we go with the building, as we go with construction. And that's what will create the elegance. And that's the benevolent part. You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you are allowed to say, no, that's not good enough. It's that.
And the interesting thing there, David, is if you're willing to be this, it folds time. And by that, I mean, you get things done quicker than anyone else could have expected in ways that no one knew were possible. And this is what's been created both with the castle and in particular with El Lugar. It's because you have no point of view about the time, but at the same time, you're willing to change. And most people would say, well, that's going to take longer, it's going to cost more. No, it's where you can actually fold time.
But what the two Davids actually talk about, which demonstrated this energy to me hugely, is that if you're able to function from the space of possibility and benevolence, meaning wishing well for all, it's cross border and override all the cultural cultural madness that people are trying to put in place. David Caddy has to deal with, Italian builder and now Spanish. I think if he's willing to talk more, it's about how could you facilitate even leader in the world to be able to lead from a space of benevolence leadership, because the way you have to deal with Costa Rican builder, you have to develop different skill than when you were dealing with Italian builder. But that in itself, it's not even the skill, it's a state of being of David Caddy that allow you to have that with ease and joy. Am I correct, David?
Yes. What do I say to that? It's like I'm just being. I just always want to create more, and I mean I'm blessed to be here. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So I just I don't know how to say. I don't deal with anybody any different than I do.
Exactly, David. I that's what I'm saying is you know how in the business world, in leadership, there have been this big trend that's saying how to do cross-cultural leading and management. But could you see for totally diverse people, having fun together when we get together, there's no such thing of cross-cultural difficulty or anything. If you look at each person and be present with that person without going into the point of view about, oh, he's Scottish and he's Viennese and she's Thai and he's Australian. There's not that in our universe. We just see that as David, Steve, and Chitusa. From that space alone, if you can be the energy that David Caddy is talking about being present and be that without even have to analyze
with each and every person.
With each and every person, you can lead from the space of possibilities without trying to say, well, he's Australian, of course he's thinking this way, or he's Austrian, of course he's doing this way. David Caddy just look at each person and say, okay, what is Chitusa choosing now? And what else, not from those words, but I can see that you actually talk to each person from the present of what is truly possible to work with that person.
What can you add to my life?
Yeah.
If you're that with everyone, you're always in a question about them.
Mm.
And there's people always have something to contribute to you if you're willing to be there for them and present. And it.
Have you ever gone into conclusion or projection and judgment about anyone? I'm just curious. I never asked you these questions.
This is the Chitusa
I'm
David
sure,
hour.
I'm sure I have. I'm sure I have. I'm sure I have. Definitely.
And
Can't think of
just
an
to give you
example.
some background information on how you can create miracles by just being. David Kelly is not fluent in Spanish, and he went there and was there all alone. And the only thing he said is, "Oh wow, it will work out." And it was magical the way we created the people that now working with us. Because when we decided, just to make it a little jump on the timeline, we had a big construction company, and of course they were all speaking English and were bilingual, and they were so overcharging us that we said, you know what, it doesn't work. We'll run we will be the construction company. We will work with locals. We will just drive out to Lugar, be there for a weekend, and let everyone know we start construction. We're looking for workers. And nobody who came to present themselves with their shovels and tractors spoke a single word English. David didn't freak out because suddenly a guy showed up and said, well, I was fluent in English, American accent, was living in the US for 20 years, came back to Costa Rica to retire, was a construction manager, and by coincidence lives 5 minutes from El Lugar and offered to work with David. And this is how we created our own construction companies, our own construction company. We have 32 people on our own payroll. We pay Social Security for them. We pay them the 13th and the 14th salary. They have full insurance, and they're all our own employees. So we kicked out the construction company before we knew that. And the weekend later, it was all created, and David had his translator, his sharing partner when he needs ideas, someone local who engages with everyone, who it just showed up. It just folded itself together because we were all following what we know. We didn't buy the lie of it won't work without. And there were many, many people, you know, those good friends that always whisper in your ear, warning you, oh my God, how you will ever do that. Sending a Scottish guy who doesn't speak a word Spanish as a construction manager with locals. Are you insane? Yes.
Who has no experience either.
Oh, get out. So these are some of these amazing stories that showed me you cannot make a mistake when you follow what you know. When you make this choice to honor the planet, the world will honor you, the planet will honor you, nature will honor you and contribute to you when you make that choice to be kind to it. And you stopped and tried to figure it out how it works. We had no clue. We were as surprised as you probably are now, and we couldn't believe it. But that's the way it is. We didn't expect it. It was obviously the key issue. It was so crazy that we had no expectations. And now it works, running our own construction company and being that incredible contribution to the community, giving the locals the job. So the money goes directly to them and their families. And that's beautiful. When you arrive, the level of gratitude everyone has, it's beautiful.
So David, I know we're heading up to the end of the hour. These are some of the stories that will never get told again unless asked. And everyone who's on this call is getting a little glimpse into benevolence actually at work, what is actually happening there. So can I just say to all the team at El Lugar and everyone who's working there, this is what the world requires, this way of being in the world. El Lugar, every one of us who's listening to this can be El Lugar in our life. So I would like to invite everyone to look at some of the things that were talked about during this conversation and the absolute delight of having David Caddy on, who, as we have said before, does not speak publicly about any of these things. So we're very grateful for that. And then just reflect on what this might look like. But one of the great things about this group is that you'll get some of the inside untold stories that actually can have a huge impact on our lives if we're willing to look at what the possibilities that are created from those stories mean for us as well. So it's great gratitude, David Kubes, that you have asked us to be part of this, because we've seen it from the outside, we've seen a little bit from the inside, and we are just in awe of what's being created, more particularly the people who are choosing to be with this.
There's a cliffhanger for me already after David Caddy said about all the random doors that he has to be able to use to create. So I can't wait to go over there and get to see what get actualized and how it's like. This is the part that I can't wait.
This is the cliffhanger. This is
and
the
get more story about
next episode.
We will all be able to see it. So yeah.
Okay.
We'll travel there soon. Steve, Chitusa, thank you so much. David, Keddy. Sorry, I haven't noticed you. That was just picking you at the moment. So thank you so much for jumping in. We didn't plan on it, but it just, the energy, I was following the energy. I didn't plan.
Can I just add something before we go? I just
Yes.
want to say thank you so much on behalf of everyone here for coming and talking to us about this. David Caddy, David Kubes, and the Bowmans, you guys are so awesome, and it's been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. And really also just to let everyone here know that there is going to be more conversations about benevolence at work. The Bowmans and David Kubes are going to be doing an intro on the 1st of September in 2 days' time. It's only €50. And, you know, this conversation is just so awesome. So if you're interested, we will send out the link, obviously, with the replay. And I'm also going to post the link here too, if anyone is interested in joining them.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. If you want to know more about Benevolence at Work or Lugar, I mean, you all are in that Lugar thread, I guess. If not, you can always join.
Yes.
Well, this is what we are creating. This is what we want to see more of on this planet. And this is what we want to invite you to Benevolence at Work, to Lugar, or to just allowing yourself to follow what you know. You know. So trust yourself, and see what that creates. And with these words, we're going to call it a quit for today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and enjoy being the spirit and the energy of Lugar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao
Bye.
for now.
Thank you so much. It was one of the amazing inspirers calls I ever had. Really, really, really. I have so much gratitude for this call. Thank you, David and all of you.
Thank you.
It opened my heart. Really,
Thank you.
really. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.